We got Sir Tailweaver again in the chat. What's up, man? Welcome back this week. All right, looks like we're about to get started in round one here. We got James Bush on Hardened Scales against Dakota O'Brien on Burn. What do you think about this matchup?
I think this matchup is generally pretty good for Burn, but Hardened Scales just has some starts that like blow out every deck.
Okay. We see here Dakota on Burn already played a Monastery Swiftspear. It's a quick one-drop creature that comes in with haste and also has prowess, so if he does cast any of his instants or sorcery burn spells, it's going to grow the creature a little bit. So, okay, so what do you know about this Hardened Scales deck compared to the classic Affinity style deck?
This deck is all about going big as opposed to going wide. Okay. When you look at older Affinity decks, they're all about playing your Springleaf Drum and getting out your entire hand quickly. Okay. This deck is less about vomiting your hand and more about building onto one guy that's going to finish them off.
Okay, great. And just to tell everybody in chat, if you guys aren't familiar with what the classic style Affinity deck is, it's basically a deck that runs a bunch of artifact style creatures that are very low mana cost that can also sacrifice themselves to Arcbound Ravager and deal a lot of damage very quickly. They also have the utility of 2 man lands that you can sacrifice your counters. You can move your counters around and eventually hit for very, very large amount of damage and even poison damage with the Inkmoth Nexus on like turn 2 and 3, right?
Yeah. In the traditional Affinity deck, you also have access to Cranial Plating. Okay. So you're not just trying to sacrifice all your guys. That's more of the, like, Hardened Scales deck is all about sacrificing your guys. Very cool. But, like, when you're not going as all in on it, you get to go wide and suit up any dude with Cranial Plating. Makes for a very interesting dynamic.
Okay, so let's look at what we have in the board state here. So our Burn player here also played a Eidolon of the Great Revel. Again, I'm just going to be naming most of this kind of stuff for anybody in chat that isn't familiar with these cards. Eidolon of the Great Revel, basically, if your opponent or yourself casts any type of any spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, is going to deal 2 damage. Do you want to go ahead and tell us why this is an important card for Burn?
This is an important card because all of the interaction in Modern, for the most part, is 3 or less mana. And especially in matchups like this, where you guys are trying to cast a lot of spells, you guys are going to take like 6 plus damage off of an Eidolon throughout the entire course of the game.
And Burn tries to get under their players pretty quick, so if they do come into a race, I'm assuming then that Burn generally will end up dealing damage quicker as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, on James Bush's side here with the Hardened Scales, that is a Arcbound Ravager, like we discussed, that was in traditional Affinity as well. But we also have a Hangerback Walker. Hangerback Walker, can you tell us a little bit about that card?
Hangerback Walker is an old standard staple, XX for a 0/0 that comes into play with X counters. In Hardened Scales, it comes in with an additional counter always. So frequently you get to play it as a 2-mana 2/2, and when it dies, it makes a number of Thopters equal to the number of counters on it. Very cool. So it's going to be a creature that's efficient, like on the play, and also when it dies, it makes an equal amount of creatures.
Cool. All right, so we see here, it looks like James Bush was he blocked. It looked like he blocked Dakota's attack.
Yeah, we're in combat right now. Dakota attacked, James blocked, and Dakota cast a Boros Charm.
Okay.
And now it looks like James is tapping Hangerback Walker to put a counter on it.
Very cool. In Burn, the Boros Charm is probably one of their most powerful Burn spells that it does have 2 modes on there, but we generally just see the Burn effect from that card, which is 4 damage to target player. The second mode on there is also to make your creatures indestructible, but we don't really see that too often in Burn, correct?
No, that doesn't come up very much. Sometimes it's like a cool way to beat a Supreme Verdict or whatever. Okay. And then the third mode actually sometimes is relevant also, is give target creature double strike until end of turn.
Oh, very cool, yeah.
Very relevant when you've got a Monastery Swiftspear in play with prowess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard actually Patrick Chafin on his podcast was talking about how a lot of those kind of cards, they call it the forgotten mode, because sometimes people will play, or like I just was discussing the card and only remembered 2, but obviously there's like, that kind of third mode that might not always be relevant necessarily to the deck. But so it looks like they're discussing here how much the converted mana cost of this card is. We have James casting
Walking Ballista.
Walking Ballista, and it is XX. He's casting it for 2, but Dakota is a little bit confused here because
X is 2.
1 second. Hey guys, they're calling for a judge. Could you get in there?
Yeah. So since X is 2, it's XX, so it'll be 4 total.
Right.
Is the converted mana cost. So he's just wondering, is my Eidolon going to trigger here? And 4 is just too high.
Very cool. Okay. So also just while they're here just figuring this out, what they're going to do, the Hardened Scales I did want to mention as well. This Hardened Scales card is a 1-drop enchantment, and it is important for this deck because the James could get this out early, and then as Jacob mentioned earlier, whenever he's casting any of these artifact cards, originally they're getting an extra counter.
Yeah, they all come in with an extra counter if they would come in with one.
Okay, and then what happens when they're set when he's moving counters around for that?
So if you're using, say, like Arcbound, the Arcbound mechanic, Modular, right? I believe is the official name of it.
Okay.
Every time you move a counter, it counts as taking it off and then placing it somewhere else.
Okay.
So Hardened Scales actually affects that as well, and so taking 1 counter off of something and putting it somewhere else is actually taking 1 and putting 2 somewhere else.
Very cool.
So it just doubles the counters every single time you try to do that.
Nice. And with Walking Ballista here, obviously this is a possible finisher for James. This Walking Ballista card can get pretty nasty pretty fast.
Yeah, it's going to get out of hand really quickly. He's got both of his like major kill conditions on the board right now.
Okay.
In Inkmoth Nexus and Walking Ballista.
Yep.
But he has no Arcbound Ravager right now,
okay,
which is the primary way to like suit them up.
To move around his counters and stuff, right? So guys in chat, this Walking Ballista, or I'm sorry, this the Walking Ballista, right? Yeah, the Walking Ballista is actually the counters on there. He could sacrifice these counters and deal damage to Dakota as well. All right, so looks like James is drew for turn. Probably deciding whether or not he wants to sit back, keep blockers, or if he's going to try and deal some maybe some damage here.
This is an interesting junction here. If you look at Dakota's hand that he was showing earlier, he has another lightning bolt sitting in there.
Okay.
So right now he actually just has lethal.
Right.
James has to find a way to win this turn, and he can't cast a spell to do it because the Eidolon will trigger.
Okay. So yeah, so if he does try to cast anything, Dakota could just respond instantly with the bolt, huh?
Yeah.
Also, it looks like we have a Rift Bolt on the stack.
Yes.
Yes.
If James does nothing,
yep,
the Rift Bolt's just going to come off suspend, and then he's going to bolt him.
Yep. So yeah, guys, Rift Bolt is a burn spell that the burn players use. That they cast it for 1, and it goes on suspend, and then the next turn they get to basically cast it for free at that point because it's already been paid for, and they could deal damage to either creature or player. If they do want to hard cast this as well, they could as well for 3 as a sorcery. A little bit interesting there that he decided to block with his Eidolon there.
I'm trying to think. Let's see. So he actually would have died if he didn't block somewhere.
Okay.
But he didn't need to block with both of them. So I think he's just trying to be safe there. Make sure he's super going to live. Because Bolt is just going to end the game.
All right, there we go. So Dakota ended up casting the Lightning Bolt in his hand, and then he had the Rift Bolt coming in next turn, so James decided to scoop there. He realized couldn't really get out of that. All right, so let's go over some of these sideboards here. This week, guys, you'll notice that we're trying to put the sideboards up here, so it looks like this week we're going to have them so you guys can just see it as well.
Let's
All
see.
right, would you guys be able to move the chat to the center of the screen while we're doing these analyzing these sideboards at all? All right, well, for now, we'll go over Dakota's sideboard. So in Dakota's sideboard, he's got a Karn Scion of...
They're backwards? That makes a little
Oh,
bit
actually,
more sense.
okay, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
so James Bush.
We're going to be fixing this for a quick second here, chat, so if you guys could just hang with us.
So James Bush's sideboard, then, is the one we're looking at.
Yeah, so
2
James...
Karn, Scion of Urza, 4 Nature's Claim, 3 Damping Sphere, 3 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Dismember, and a Graft Digger's Cage. In this matchup, there's actually not too much he really wants to be bringing in. He might bring in Nature's Claim because Nature's Claim can it gives the controller of whatever you target the life. so he can target his own things to gain 4 life.
Yeah, that sounds good. Also, if he is in a spot where he's willing to try and take out an Eidolon, he could also target that one as well, because the Eidolon is an enchantment.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's look at Dakota's sideboard. Again, guys in chat, these are swapped, so we're going to be fixing these, but Dakota, underneath Dakota's name is actually James's sideboard right now. And all right.
Oh,
now we're fixed.
All right.
All right, so underneath Dakota's, we got 2 Searing Bloods, 2 Torpor Orbs, 3 Rest in Peace, 1 Anger, 2 Smash, 1 Wear and Tear, 2 Satyr Fire Dancer, very cool, and 2 Path to Exiles. What do you like in this sideboard?
I actually think Dakota has a lot of cards he can think about bringing in. I like Searing Blood in this matchup, especially alongside Torpor Orb, which I think is coming in for sure.
Yeah, what does Searing Blood do?
Searing Blood is 2 mana, red for an instant. It deals 2 damage, I believe, to target creature, and if that creature dies this turn, it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller.
Cool.
So that's going to be a really good way to get rid of any of the smaller artifact creatures before they can do big damage. And Torpor Orb is also going to be huge in this matchup because it makes creatures like Arcbound Ravager and Arcbound Worker come into play with no counters on them and instantly die.
Torpor Orb is actually really sweet. I talked to Dakota like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about how you don't really see this too much in most modern sideboards, but it's very good against humans, very good against spirits, and obviously, as we're seeing here, it's a good against Hardened Scales. All right, if we could just get chat back up on the screen here for us as well. All right, cool. And then, all right, guys, we're starting game 2. Dakota's up 1-0 on James Bush. All right, so let's try and get some question here from in chat. We got Sir Tail Weaver.
What is the benefit of running Anger of the Gods in the sideboard?
Oh, so I can answer this one. Anger of the Gods is a sweeper, basically, for red spells that exiles the creatures when it destroys them. So this is really important for any type of deck that has graveyard recursion, so that they can't get them back. And then it's also obviously very good as well as just stopping decks that are quick with a lot of fast, hasty creatures.
I like bringing this in against like humans as well. A lot of people wouldn't think of that. Normally you'd think of it as just a pure race. But if you can just land Anger of the Gods, you're free to just draw all your burn spells slowly and just get there. You don't have to worry about, are they going to beat me before I beat them?
Yeah, exactly. This is one of the most powerful sweepers, I think, in Modern. Now, actually, I've told chat last week I play humans, and one of the interesting things is Tajik that just came out is very good against this card. Tajik stops any type of non-combat damage to creatures you control, which is, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah, I think everyone who read Tajik was like, oh, that card's sick, and then forgot about that line.
Yeah.
And didn't realize that the card is like that much better.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so we're starting off again. Same start for Dakota. James is on the play. James did play a what's this? The
Arcbound or animation module.
Animation module. This is another way for him to get counters on some of his stuff, and just add some extra counters quickly.
This is also going to be very good against a start Burn has, where they're trying to apply pressure with creatures. Okay. Because every time something gets a counter, he can make a servo for 1 mana.
Very cool.
So he's just going to gum up the board real quick.
James has had a pretty nice start here so far. If you guys noticed that it's an Arcbound Worker, that's one of the modular creatures as well. That's a newer. That's not a newer card, but it is something that we haven't seen since like when Affinity first was out. That was one of the cards I believe that was in it years ago, and then we didn't see it for a while. And now it's being brought back into the Hardened Scales version. Dakota here starting off trying to figure out here what he's going to do for turn 2. He's probably trying to figure out if he wants to play an Eidolon, or if he wants to attempt to remove one of these creatures, or if he's just going to keep trying to go to the face. So we'll see what he does here. Looks like he's got a handful of good spells there, too.
I think I see a Searing Blaze down there, and I think that might just be where he wants to go right now. Yep. Searing Blaze is going to be very powerful, especially since he just got landfall.
There we go.
Yeah, and he just gets to get rid of that worker before it can go on to something really powerful.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Also, some players don't always have, since this Hardened Scales deck is still relatively new, there's a chance that like maybe Dakota doesn't have like a whole ton of experience playing against it yet, so he's maybe a little bit unsure as to if, with James's board state, if he would have been able to manipulate anything, any counters at that turn, so he might have been just taking a little bit of time to check it out.
This deck just plays in a very unique way. It's kind of hard to know what to do the first time you play against it.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. Guys, also, anybody in chat that doesn't know what this Mox Opal is, this is one of the probably strongest cards in Modern in a weird way. This card is a 0-drop artifact that if you have 3 or more artifacts on the field, which gives you Metalcraft, this just gets to tap for any color. You see a lot of the strongest decks in Modern utilizing this. Did you want to go over a couple of the decks?
Sure. You'll see this in KCI as an integral combo piece.
Okay.
It's part of all of the loops and a great accelerant. You'll see it in both versions of Affinity, Hardened Scales and the regular version, as it allows you to just dump your hand very quickly and also just play around things you couldn't before. There are a lot of times where you'll like get Spell Pierced or something for your relevant artifact, and you like it's turn 3 or whatever. You shouldn't be able to have 2 mana up, but Mox Opal will help you out there.
Yep.
And I can't think of any other decks that are running it right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Affinities and KCI are the big ones.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so Dakota here being real aggressive with his attack, trying to put some pressure on James, make him make some plays, and he doesn't want to let James, I don't think, get too out of control here, so Swissbeer got chump locked, and looks like he's passing back to James here. So tell us about James's lands that he's got out here right now.
So he's got out 3 really powerful lands. Darksteel Citadel is an artifact. It's also indestructible. It doesn't come up too often, but it is relevant. Being an artifact is much more relevant, though, as it allows Metalcraft for Mox Opal and can be sacrificed to Arcbound Ravager for utility. He's got an Inkmoth Nexus, 2 Inkmoth Nexuses here, and he can suit that up with a bunch of counters by moving them around with Ravager first, and get 10 Infect very quickly.
Very cool. Looks like he actually animated that one of his Inkmoth Nexuses this turn as well. All right, so really quick in chat while they're deciding their attacks. Hey, what's up, DJ413? How's it going? Thanks. Welcome back. We remember you from last week. And then we have Cryu. He says, it's a Mox in its name, therefore it's good. Yeah. Anybody that knows... Well, that's not always necessarily true, because we did have a recent Mox come out that nobody is playing, Mox Amber. But, yeah, for traditional Magic lore, Moxes are pretty sweet. They're usually able to be... cast very easy, if not free, and usually give you the ability to combo off with pretty good power.
Yeah, there's a Mox banned in Modern, Chrome Mox, and there are a few decks in Legacy that are playing 8 Moxes.
Yep. What's up, Itty Bitty Kitty? Welcome back to stream. Yeah, a bunch of you guys that were here last week. Really happy to see you guys again. Have you guys back? If you guys have any questions for decks you want to see tonight, let us know also. Just like anytime you guys want to ask us cool questions to talk about, feel free to just go ahead and start writing it in chat. All right, so Dakota here. He's got James down to 9, but James has a pretty good board presence right now. He can go off pretty much any turn. Dakota's probably a little bit worried about that in terms of whether he wants to keep his spells in his hand for removal or to hit James' direct damage line.
Yeah, I think James actually might just be able to win this turn.
Okay.
If he animates Inkmoth Nexus and sacrifices all of his artifacts, which is a very risky line.
Okay.
So it's probably why he hasn't gone for it. He can put 9 counters on Inkmoth Nexus.
Okay,
and
very
that
cool.
would be 10 Infect right there.
Yeah, again, guys, that's he's talking about the Infect land, which is flying and deals damage, or deals its damage and Infect instead. Itty Bitty Kitty says, weighs the roost... what's the roster looking like tonight? I did get a message. I put out a post today about people that had spicy decks. I did get a pretty cool response on that. We're going to try and see. I'm going to talk to our tech guy, Andrew, and see if he wants to try and grab them for round 2 or 3. So hopefully getting the pretty cool little spicy deck in here. And then I don't know. What do you guys want to see? We could also ask around and look. I was kind of in the mood to try and see if we can get a Tron deck on there tonight. I don't know if we have one in because last week we didn't get to see Tron at all.
That's kind of the story of this format recently.
Okay.
Is how can people beat up on Tron? No, it feels like nobody likes Tron except the Tron players.
Yeah.
Or the people who have a good Tron matchup naturally.
Oh yeah.
So people are always joking about how do I beat Tron? And Guilds of Ravnica gave everyone a card they thought was like great against Tron in Assassin's Trophy, and Tron is just still sitting around, doesn't care.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about Tron a little bit last week on stream. You guys saw those Tron lands that we put up on stream last week. Actually, did we see Tron? Okay, yes, we did. We did see Tron last week, didn't we? I don't remember. I'm not sure. We might have saw Tron actually last week as well. But all right, James here is attacking again with trying to do a little bit of infect damage. I don't think he pumped it at all. Just
taking the slow route. He doesn't have to open himself up to any additional risk if he just sits here and plays it slow.
So all right, so at the end of turn there, we saw Dakota just hit a Boros Charm for 7, for 4, bringing James down to 7. All right, and Dakota just passed his turn. Just keeping that Monastery Swift Spear back, I think it's just a little blocker to try and stop the Ravager from really from beating him down too much.
I think he's also very worried that if he attacks, he's just going to lose it. Okay. And if James tries anything crazy, he's going to be able to get in with it later.
True. Yep. Yeah, also I think obviously if he attacks, he would be forced to have to like try and cast some spells to get the prowess up, and he's probably waiting to try and just hit James in response, and or at the end of his turn.
Well, it looks like his hand has Boros Charm, another Boros Charm, and two mana burn spells.
Okay.
That'll each deal 3. So he's got a slow kill.
Okay.
But
so he just
needs time.
Yeah, I mean, so if he's got another Boros Charm in hand, if he survives this turn, he pretty much should be sitting okay then.
Yeah. If he just makes it, he just has to figure out how he makes it through this turn.
Hard to see what's in James's hand. It looks like he's got another.
I see Evolutionary Leap, Hangerback Walker, and Forest.
Yeah, so not a whole ton that he can really do to stop direct damage to the face here.
No. The only real way he can try to stop direct damage to the face here is to just try to win.
Okay. Put the pressure on.
He's going to put the counters on Inkmoth Nexus. All right.
Looks like, okay, so James there just, he just ended up putting all the counters on Inkmoth and getting enough infect. It only takes 10 infect to kill you, so.
Yeah.
All right, so we got another person in chat. Sir Tailweaver again says, so one major thing I've noticed in Modern is the number of lands people end up playing, which is usually somewhat limited. How many lands does a normal Modern deck run, and how many lands should you keep in an open hand? Do you want me to take this one, or?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay, sure. I'll say my opinion, and then Jacob can say his here as well. Just both. So normally it depends on like how many colors you're running in your deck. That's one of the factors. Another factor is what your converted mana costs of like your cards in your deck are. They call it a mana curve. So if you basically have, a lot of low casting spells in your deck, you're not going to need as much lands. It's also if you're a control deck and you're going to want more. You're going to want more lands in there. It's very subjective as to what style of deck you're playing. Some decks like Burn are going to have less lands and also more fetch lands to try and thin out how many lands they draw, because they do put themselves in top deck modes where they're literally relying on getting a spell every turn, and their whole entire deck operates off just 1 or 2 mana. Do you want to take the rest, Jacob? What do you think?
Sure. When I think about Modern mana bases, there are like a ton of different factors that tell me how many lands a deck should be running. Okay. The later the game is trying to go is a big one. A lot of decks in Modern are trying to end the game on like turn 3 or 4, and at that point you only have like 3 or 4 draw steps, so you're not too worried about your lands. You just need to hit 1 every turn. So you probably want to like 21-ish lands is like a number you'll see a lot for a lot of different Modern decks.
Yep.
But if you want the game to go really long, like a control deck would, you want to have like 26-ish lands because you want to never miss a land drop, and you want to always be doing something impactful. So you want to make sure you're always interacting.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal experience, I told chat last week, one of my decks, my pet decks is Cheerios. That deck plays like 14 or 15 lands, and then I also used to play blue-white control. I mentioned last week also, and that deck runs traditionally 25 lands.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big swing. That's 10 mana difference. So I don't really tend to see too many decks that run more than 25 or 26 lands, and I don't tend to see any decks that would ever want to run less than 15.
Yeah.
So that's about your range, I want to say, to Sir Tailweaver.
One of the big things about whether or not you want to be running like so few lands, especially for Cheerios is a really good example of a deck that wants to run so few, is that Cheerios is a deck that's trying to win the game on turn 2.
Right.
You don't need to draw any more lands than 2 for the entire duration of the game.
Yep.
Because the game isn't going to let you play a third land.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, also just to mention, in case you guys don't know this is kind of cool, but there is a vintage deck that is called Manaless Dredge, and it runs no lands, and I think except it might just run it
runs 4 copies of Bazaar of Baghdad.
Yeah, Bazaar of Baghdad. Yep. Can we get that up on screen, Andrew, just since we're not in the game yet? Bazaar of Baghdad. This is a cool card. This card actually is a land that it's a legacy deck, he says.
It's in both formats.
Yeah, Bazaar of Baghdad, I'm pretty sure is banned in legacy, isn't it?
I believe it's banned in legacy.
Yeah,
but there's a vintage version, or there's the vintage version which runs Bazaars, and there's a legacy version.
Gotcha. Okay, just a normal legacy version. Yeah. What's up, Jacob? Jacob is boss. What's up, man? Vintage Dredge plays 15 lands. Okay, cool. Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate that. So yeah, so someone in chat says the vintage one plays 15 lands. Cool. Thank you so much. And yeah, Bazaar's a sweet card. That basically just lets you fill up your graveyard pretty quick.
Yeah.
All right. So here James actually has a pretty decent start. Not really sure what Dakota's got in hand, but Dakota was on the play here, and we don't see any creatures. Normally not the greatest start for Burn, and I like to see a creature on board to put a little bit of pressure on the opponent.
Yeah. I'm imagining he's got some sort of sideboard card in his hand that is really impactful in the matchup for him to have wanted to keep this.
Jacob says, have you ever seen Oops All Spells in Legacy?
That's a sweet deck.
Yeah, that is sweet. I'm sure
just actually 0 lands.
Yeah, I believe Bazaar is banned in Legacy as well. We had just mentioned it was in Vintage. No, I'm not a Vintage player, so I don't really know. I've seen it I've seen some of it on stream a couple times on YouTube. Yeah. Also, obviously, Vintage is super expensive. To try and get into Vintage, you're better off playing on MTGO. They make it a lot more affordable if you want to get like the Power 9 on there compared to like in real life. Power 9 is like going to put you back like $20,000 or something.
It's just like unreasonable for the majority of people to ever even try to play.
Yeah. Jacob says it's a real deck. Eugen for him. Yeah. So sounds like Jacob knows his Legacy pretty good, and yeah, he's saying Oops All Spells sounds like a cool deck. All right, so James here getting it going, making things happen on board. Got a huge board presence, looking to put some massive pressure on Dakota here next turn. See what Dakota does with that Rift Bolt. All right, Dakota put it straight to James's face. James down to 14, and now we need a really big turn here from Dakota, or he's going to be facing. He's going to
be behind by a lot.
Yeah,
and he's going to be looking for stuff off the top too.
Yep. So I could see in Dakota's hand here, he's got a land, and he's got a Searing Blaze or a Searing Blood. It looked like, and a Lightning Helix. It looked like. So, assuming he's going to be wanting to cast that Searing Blood or Searing Blaze, either I couldn't see which one it was. Jacob says Eugen 4 mana. Spirit Guides, Petals to make under City Informer, another dude mill on the entire deck. Yeah, sweet. Sounds sweet, Jacob.
It is a very sweet deck.
Is it? Yeah.
You get to play Draft All-Stars from Gate Crash,
Nice.
Balustrade Spy, and Undercity Informant.
Okay.
They just mill target player until they hit a land,
Yeah.
but you just mill yourself and have no lands.
Oh, hell yeah. All right, Dakota just casted his Lightning Helix to James's face. Again, now this is a perfect example of what we were talking about, how sometimes this burn deck just ends up having to start like top decking spells. We already know that Dakota has one land. You know what? Actually, let's make sure. Yep, the door's closed. All right. We know that Dakota's got one land in hand, and so he's going to be wanting to top deck some.
Yeah, he needs
some heavy
he needs
hitters
some
here.
action.
He needs some Boros Charms. He needs just straight burn. I don't even think creatures are going to do anything for him here against James because James has a pretty big board state already. Can we get some conversation here in chat? You guys just let us know what formats you play. It looks like we got a couple Legacy players in here today in the stream. Pretty sweet. So let us know if you guys are EDH players, Legacy players, Modern. All right, James here attacking. In his attack step, Dakota is going to Searing Blood one of them. This is a little bit different than Searing Blaze. This one actually just deals 2 damage. And, yep, here we go, up on screen. Just deals 2 damage, and when that creature dies, it deals 3 damage to the creature's controller. So this one's not reliant on a landfall trigger.
Yeah, so the 3 damage is always 3 damage.
Okay.
The problem is that the 2 damage to the creature can never be 3 damage, like in Searing Blaze.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the consistent part is that you'll always deal 3 to the opponent, but you won't always be able to kill the creature. So sometimes it doesn't even trigger.
Okay. And we saw this was one of his sideboard cards, right? Yep.
Yeah, he had 2 in the sideboard.
Okay. In chat, we say, Sir Zealtaper EDH, I'm definitely a casual scrub. Well, good to have you here still. And then Jacob, Modern cardboard is too expensive. Yeah. Sometimes it is.
In response to that Searing Blood, James is Nature's claiming to gain 4 life and move 2 counters to the servo so it doesn't die to Searing Blood.
Wow, you called it then, huh? That was one of the options that you were saying that you thought would be key for him in that sideboard.
Yeah, gaining 4 life is huge, and that interaction there, I hadn't even thought of that. The ability to save it from a burn spell that would otherwise deal damage to him.
Very cool. So yeah, James, I think, sitting in a pretty good spot here. He went up to 15. It's going to be really difficult for Dakota to try and muster up some extra damage now. He was already behind before, and now it's definitely... Most of what the burn does is they want to be able to have each of their spells deal 3 damage or give them some kind of value to that effect. And he's got just 2 damage spells in hand, it looks like, still.
Yeah, the goal for the whole game is play 7 different spells that all deal at least 3 damage.
Okay.
And if you can find multiple spells that will allow you to cast maybe 6 spells, one of them does 5 damage throughout the game, like a Goblin Guide gets in for 6 total, then you just saved a spell. But he's out here, he's going to have to cast like 9 spells this game already.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why most burn in Modern, they don't really run like any of their big card draw engines in the sideboard. But when burn was in Standard a couple years ago, like 2 years ago, we saw people running Outpost Siege or even the old Chandra just as a 4-mana spell that would kind of get on board and allow you to get a little bit extra card draw every turn. Yeah. We don't really see that too often in people's sideboards, but like sometimes you'll see somebody play one of the new Chandras.
Yeah.
All right, so Itty Bitty Kitty in board. What do you guys like to see on Bad Modern? We could probably talk about that when just after this match here, because that's probably a pretty cool thing we could talk about. I know we did a little bit of that last week too, but and then 11 EDH decks, 1 Modern, 1 Tiny Litter. Sweet. And see you later, Jacob. Nice to see you today, man. Yeah, so James here talking. I can hear him. He's saying like it doesn't really matter. He's pretty much got everything on board he needs to just go off and win. There we go. All right, so James Bush takes it down. Really, really tough first game for James. Close second game, but that third game he just really showed.
Yeah, I think that matchup is a very interesting one, but for the most part, you're gonna see Hardened Scales come out on top.
Oh yeah.
Everybody thinks of Burn as like the fast deck in the format, but there are actually just so many decks that go faster than Burn.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Also, like we were talking about, if they miss one or two of their spells, they start to just get really weak to being able to recharge their hand. All right, guys. In chat here, do you guys want? Should we grab James Bush? That's probably a good quick little